Yeah. So first thing, Shashank, I think the good thing is that now people understand that an acquisition and an exit is a good thing, right? Because us from the finance world, we know it's a good thing and it's so rare. But I got some super random comments and people messaging saying, "You sold it. What happened? Did you need the money?" Etc. Etc. All of that.
Hello and welcome. I'm Shashank Mehta, founder at The Whole Truth Foods. As the founder of a young startup, I've seen firsthand the immense challenges that come with starting and scaling a company. No founder can be fully prepared for what entrepreneurship looks like. But we can definitely learn from the giants who've come before us. Stalwart founders who've built great companies and who've perhaps faced those very same challenges and overcome them. On this podcast, I speak to them, founder to founder, and try and unearth the whole truth of starting up. Let's begin. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of The Whole Truth of Starting Up. Today I have the pleasure of hosting Arjun Vaidya, founder and CEO of Dr.Vaidya's, India's largest online Ayurveda brand. Arjun is a friend and mentor to many of us founders in the D2C space, and he's also one of the very, very few D2C founders to have built and exited his startup. And so in today's chat, I'll try and decode the whole truth of exiting a startup with Arjun. Welcome, Arjun, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Shashank, for having me. And I must say that it's my pleasure to be on this conversation because other than you being a friend, I'm a huge fan of the brand as well. So really excited to be part of this conversation.
That's so kind of you. That's so kind of you. And we're so early in our journey. We've learned a lot from stalwarts like you who've come before us, and that's the reason we do this podcast, so that we can also give back to other founders who are just starting out and tackling complex questions. And on that note, before I get to the meat of the conversation about exiting, why don't you give a quick elevator pitch summary of Dr. Vaidya's journey as a brand, so that our listeners have context about where the brand comes from.
Sure. So I haven't done this for a little bit, so it feels nice to do it again. So look, very quickly, Vaidya, my last name means Ayurvedic doctor. I come from a legacy of 150 years of Ayurveda in my family. My grandfather, great-grandfather, and generations before Ayurvedic doctors. The legacy of our business actually wasn't a business. It was an Ayurvedic clinic that my grandfather and my great-grandfather used to run. I grew up with juvenile bronchitis and I'm cured of asthma using Ayurvedic treatment. So it meant more to me than just family legacy. It allowed me to start playing cricket again. It allowed me to have ice cream for the first time in my life. So Ayurveda meant a lot to me. I went to the US, I did my undergrad there. I saw a move toward natural organic products. I also saw yoga being repackaged, and patriotic that I am, I thought we should not let the same happen to the Ayurveda in the sense that they took what we had, repackaged and sold it back to us, right? With yoga mats, yoga gyms, yoga apparel, Lululemon, those kind of things. So came back to India, did 3 years in private equity at a fund called L Capital, now called L Caratan. Focus on the consumer sector and saw some big changes happen in India. So I think I grew up in India obsessed with imported products. I came back to an India happy to consume quintessentially Indian brands. Ayurveda was undergoing its own renaissance, 2014 to 2019. And I got to work on e-commerce early on, right? 2013, 14, 15. So all of these macro things were happening and my grandfather passed. And so I made him a promise at some point I'll do something with the legacy. And yeah, I was 24 and a half at the time. So I said, look, this is the only time that I can take this risk and just make it happen. So I quit my job, started a company, named it Dr. Vaidya's to take 150 years of our family legacy and 5,000 years of Ayurvedic science and try to repackage to appeal to modern consumers. Long story short, we started with 2 products in October 2016. One is called Live It Up, which is a hangover shield. Others called Herbofit Chyawanprash in capsule form. And failed miserably offline in the first 3-4 months. By mid 2017, pretty much decided offline wasn't for us. And that time sort of made the conscious effort to pivot online before D2C was hot and exciting and cool, by the way. 2017, there was no word like D2C. It was digital first, online only types. My wife was at Goldman, the UK, and she had come back to India and she was working she was in the founding team at Nykaa actually. This time we were dating. So I convinced her to come and join the ship and help build e-commerce. She got convinced. Family wasn't okay. So we waited till we got engaged. Then she joined. And from there, we sort of started our journey. And the rest is history. Basically, we built pretty large Ayurveda brand, got up to 5,000 orders a day, did 1.5 million orders just around website. And the exciting part about what we did was we reached 16,500 pin codes. So really built a pan-India brand without offline distribution, which is to me the most exciting part about what we did. And yeah, I think we were lucky to bring a strategic investor on board who resonated what we did. And in 2020, like for most health and wellness businesses, was a standout year for us. Eventually got an offer from them to acquire the business. We took the offer, and in March 2021 officially exited the business. Yeah, so that's the Dr. Vaidya's 4.5 years in a few minutes.
In a few minutes. I'm so sorry. I apologize for making you do this. I know so much blood, sweat, and tear goes into it. It almost feels wrong to ask to summarize it, but that was just the preamble to what I want to get into next. And you touched upon it, which is the fact that you very early on took investment from the RPSG group, which in the VC world would be called taking investment from a strategic, someone who operates a business in the same space as in which you operate a business. And there are a ton of decisions around whether you should get invested in by a strategic, because some believe it limits then your ability to raise from venture capitalists. And there are so many other options of raising from angels, raising from small funds, big funds, strategic, etc. How did you go about that decision when you were deciding to get RPSG Group on board?
So Shashank, I think as much as we theorize these things, right, eventually whether it's an exit or raising capital, it comes down to something super personal, right? It's two people in a room having a conversation to build a partnership, right? So while I came from private equity, I had all these theories, all of these things that I thought about. I eventually ended up just looking at that specific situation and seeing what was best for the business at that period of time, right? So look, from an angel perspective, I'm an active angel now, so I recommend people take angel, but I didn't do any angel round for Dr. Vaidya's because actually my family did the seed, right? So the first, I would say $500,000, my dada had left behind some money for this vision if it ever happened. And so basically we used that money and we started, right? So we didn't dilute at that time, and we sort of did what we had to. Look, I think there are good and bad things with that, right? The good thing is you don't dilute at all. The bad thing is you're basically on your own then, right? So as much as you get advisors and mentors and all of those things, and people are nice and they give you time, there is no one with skin in the game in your business except you, right? And so initially as a single founder at 24.5 years old, I really struggled, right? So eventually I had to rope my wife in and bring a co-founder and be able to sort of manage, because look, CPG is complicated, right? It's especially in a business which did manufacturing ourselves. I had to run a factory. I had to do finance, accounts, procurement, supply chain, sales, marketing, distribution, legal, HR, IT, admin, and strategy and maybe fundraise. And that was like too much for me to handle, both with limited experience and also in general, like even today, if you ask me to do all those things alone, I may not be able to do it, right? So I think from that perspective, we didn't raise an angel round, and that's a honest challenge that we faced, right? It was a pretty lonely journey. When it came to the fundraise, actually, to be honest, Shashank, we also raised money at a different time, right? Like D2C was not hot at that time. And initially in 2017, 2018, when we were going to investors, they were like you cannot operate a website which gets sales more than 50, 100 orders a day, right? Like that was the conversation that was happening. And people were saying like, you have to be offline and stuff. And because we had failed so miserably, I was like fundamentally scared of going back offline, right? So we said, chalo, we'll keep it going. So it was a different paradigm, right? Like our paradigm when we were operating Dr. Vaidya's was, hey, we have to convince Shashank to come online. If he comes online, he'll buy Dr. Vaidya's, right? If he's buying Ayurveda, because there's nobody else taking that risk. But convincing Shashank online was the challenge, right? So numbers were very different at that time. Scale was very different. In my head, if you told me, would we get to 5,000 hours a day at 50 hours a day, I would have said no, right? It's not possible. I would have said like online brands cannot reach there, right? Because everybody was questioning it at that time. And so you finally end up questioning it, right? So I remember like cutting cakes when we reached 100 orders a day, 200 orders a day, 300, every 100 orders we'd cut a cake, right? And eventually it became like, okay, you're cutting a cake 3 times a week, but we did it. But like that's how we were thinking at that time in 2018, 2019. I think when we eventually decided we need to raise capital and sort of hypercharge this business, it was only after we had got PMF. And for me, PMF was like 50, 100 orders a day on your own website, right? Because until then, you don't even know whether there's enough market. Today, like everybody knows D2C works. At that time, we didn't know, right? So I think we waited for that to happen. When that happened at a CAC, which made like reasonable sense, and we smelled the business, right? I feel like as founders, as entrepreneurs, you always smell when it's working, right? And you know when it's not working, when it starts working, you smell it. Like you're like, okay, now this can be really big, right? And once we reached that in November 2018, then we said, okay, now this is a business. This is not just two young people trying to like throw darts onto a dartboard and seeing what works, right? It's now really something that can be a really big brand. And then we started with our fundraise journey. I wasn't as theoretical about, do I want a VC? Do I want a strategic? Do I want all of these things? We had all the options on the table. Eventually, we chose someone who had most conviction to what we were doing, right? They weren't questioning, does Ayurveda work? Do you think this can be big? None of that, right? It was like, this can be really, really large. You are the right people for this opportunity. Now let's find a way to work. So we eventually chose the people who said, look, we believe in you and we believe this can be like 100 times the size it is right now, because you are right, your products are right, your vision is right, etc. All of that. So eventually, look, there are pros and cons of a strategic, right? And we knew all the pros and cons, and we can discuss that. We knew all the pros and cons getting into it. But eventually, just like the people and their conviction in relation to what we were doing. So then we said, okay, look, you are the right people. We want to work with you. Now let's make a structure that makes both parties incentivized to make this work.
Got it. And actually, let's actually do that for the young founders listening to this podcast. That what are the top pros and cons of getting a strategic in not your situation specifically? Let's say in today's day and age, when the venture capital ecosystem has matured drastically around the D2C space. What are the pros and cons of evaluating a strategic versus a VC at, let's say, the seed to Series A, Series B sort of stage?
Yeah, look, I think, Shashank, it's also a more relevant conversation because the opportunities for D2C founders are also now more available, because you now have the e-commerce roll-up teams and the strategics and the venture capitalists, right? So you have three options right now. And I think it's important to talk about it, right? Because look, no one is good and no one is bad, right? It's not like something is better and something is worse. It's just where you are in life and sort of what your business has reached and what your options are, right? So the good and bad of a strategic. The good is that basically you're getting someone who has some strategic interest and has some strategic value add and can genuinely add value to the business. That's one good. The other good is pretty much, if you bring a strategic on board, your outcome is guaranteed as a founder, right? See, at the end of the day, one thing which founders miss today, right, is if you raise primary capital, it's great, and it helps you build a business. But it's also just on paper until you're able to monetize that outcome, right? And look, there's nothing wrong or right with it. It's just like, it's important for people to know this. And I was fortunate to have worked in private equity to understand this. So look, with a strategic, you have a guaranteed outcome, right? The bad part about strategic is, like a CCPS instrument that you're raising money with, your floor and cap is pretty much determined, right? Like, for example, like, okay, in all likelihood, I'll make 100 rupees from this transaction, but the minimum I'll make is 70 and the maximum I'll make is 130, 140, right? So that's what you're letting yourself, you're capping your downside, but also capping your upside, right? The great part about a venture capitalist is basically you are getting someone on board who's saying, we need to grow this really, really big, really, really fast, and there is no cap on your upside. And by the way, I am a minority shareholder in your company, so you're the one who's going to make it happen. The slightly not so good part would be that, look, eventually you're partnering with a fund that has a fund life cycle, right? And so it's your fiduciary responsibility to grow the business, but also give the fund an outcome, right? And so I think no cap on outcome at all for founder, both sides, right? So there's no cap on downside, no cap on upside. But I think in both cases, right, the same thing remains, which is whether there is cap on upside or downside, whatever it is, right? Investment is a marriage, right? You're together for a very, very long period of time, and you have to see each other's faces, whether you like it or not, for a really long period of time, right? And when a deal is happening and initially when the courtship is happening on both sides, everyone's nice to each other and everyone's really happy with each other. But eventually, in a 5, 7, 10-year relationship, there will be tough times, right? And you have to, I remember hearing an investor say this, and I really liked that conversation. He said, I will only invest in founders who I can have lunch or dinner with, right? And eventually the relationship boils down to not just professional, it boils down to a personal relationship. And I had that with my investors. You have had that with your investors, and you will have that with your investors going forward. So I think regardless of whether it's a strategic or a VC or a seed round or an angel or a family office, whatever that is, right? You have to be comfortable with those people, right? And even if you're raising an angel round where it's syndicated, the person who's leading the syndicate also has to be someone you're comfortable.
Absolutely. So it's funny how what looks from the outside to be such an objective, rational, quantitative decision, given the fact that two human beings are making the decision, actually comes down to a lot of emotion and finding a thought fit and an outlook fit more than just the money. So appreciate the fact that you gave such an honest answer there. I want to now finally, now that we've laid the ground, deep dive into the acquisition bit of it, the exit bit of it. Lift the hood and tell us, what does an acquisition look like? Like most founders out there in India today don't know what it looks like. Like what does it look like to the people involved in the company? How does a small company integrate into a big company? What's the role of the founder once he or she is exited? These are some of the thoughts, but I like, please riff on and let us know, what does the acquisition look like?
Yeah. So first thing, Shashank, I think the good thing is that now people understand that an acquisition and an exit is a good thing, right? Because us from the finance world, we know it's a good thing and it's so rare. But I got some super random comments and like people messaging saying, "You sold it. What happened? Did you need the money?" Etc. Etc. All of that, right? So I think with the rise of the Thrasio teams, plus with sort of outcomes like ours and like Beardo and like Just Herbs and like Soulful, etc., all of that, people are understanding now what this means, right? And I don't blame people who think it's a bad thing because it's new, right? And anything that's new is okay. And I could have taken offense to some really random comments that were thrown at me, but I also know that, look, it comes from a place of not knowing, right? So it's okay. So I think from that perspective, right? I think like we don't celebrate failures enough in India. We don't celebrate acquisitions enough, and we should, right? Because it just shows that there is some outcome for all the work that's been put in, right? And I'm so happy to see more and more of these outcomes happen because um, all the founders that have had the acquisitions are folks who can then add back value to the ecosystem, can invest in the next set of brands and all of those things. So I think that's the first sort of context I want to really look as an acquisition, right? We had a strategic investment which eventually led to an acquisition, but our investors took a majority on day one, right? But they took a majority saying, hey, we're just taking a majority today, but we want you to run this business and scale it, right? So from that perspective, there was always like, I get the question that, did you always build this business to sell it? No, I didn't. And for anybody who's thinking of ever selling their business, don't build a business to sell. Because you build a business to sell and you can't sell it, you're stuck. And that's end game for your business, right? Build a good business. You'll get various options if you build a really good business. Then you choose whatever option you personally like, right? So never built a business to sell. Once he did raise capital from RPIG and once he did get a strategic investment, yes, the writing was on the wall. The deal was structured in such a way that they'll eventually acquire the business. The acquisition was not thought of to be so quick, but the business also had a great run, right? And grew very well. And COVID happened, and health and wellness, market leadership position, etc., all of that. So there was a structure created for the acquisition to happen, complete acquisition to happen, and I think that we knew from day one, right? But we never, even after the investment, operated like it wasn't our business. We always operated like it was our business. We were the founders. We were running the show. Shareholding pattern may have changed slightly. That didn't change anything, right? And from that perspective, I think our investors have to also be commended, because even though they had majority, they knew that the business was new and they needed to learn it, and we need to be the ones driving it. So for the 18 months that we did work together, or I think 21 months we did work together, 18 of running the business together and 3 of the handover, it was totally our show, at least for the 18 months, not for the handover period, obviously, because we had to start letting go. What does an acquisition look like? To be honest, for us, it was super easy to integrate, because for the 18 months we were running the business, we were running the show. It was just like any investor. You have some sort of monthly board meetings, etc., all of that, and sharing of data and tracking strategic initiatives. Pretty much, other than that, was business as usual and scale as usual and growing as usual. You had a few other shareholders who were willing to help you, which we had never seen before. Look, I think the exit part, right? This is different in different situations, right? So from our perspective, I said, look, we are exiting the business, etc. All of that. They made an offer, we accepted the offer, and we moved on and decided to exit. But I said specifically that, look, it's not good for me to stick on after I've decided to exit because it will cause confusion in the organization. I'm a founder who's built a lot of the people in our organization from zero to where they are today. And so the longer I stay, the more difficult it will be. So for me specifically, we took a 3-month handover period where we handed over the business completely and then we left. There are other businesses which have a 6-month, 1 year, 2 year handover period. From our perspective, it was super easy. For the team, actually nothing changed, right? The same team is still executing the business, just that Trisha and I are not there any longer. But the people still sit the same. And some people may have the sort of inkling to say, hey, I don't want to work in a larger corporate organization, because eventually when a larger corporate does take charge, it becomes a little bit more structured. And some people said, we don't want to work in a corporate, we want to stay in a startup. And those people moved on, but most of the team still stuck on and sort of are still part of the vision and still executing the vision. So I think that's how it works. It's not as scary as it seems from the outside.
It's not scary, but emotionally, how is it? Because
that's a totally different ballgame, which I've not talked about. Yeah, that's a totally different ballgame.
Let's talk about, like, as a founder, something you've given life and blood to bring up like a baby. While there is the joy and euphoria of bringing it to closure, I'm assuming there is also a bittersweet sort of feeling of having to let go of your baby and now watching it from a distance and there might be decisions in the future that you like, that you don't like, directions that might be taken, but you've taken the hard call of now being on the sidelines and giving advice, but you're not steering the ship anymore.
Yeah, look, Shashank, I think we had a discussion with the family when we decided to exit the business as well, right? And when we had that discussion, my dad said one thing: look, you've built this business. It's eventually yours and Trisha's decision. The moment you take decision, whatever you take, right? The moment you decide to leave, that's it. It's over, right? So if this becomes a unicorn, or if this doesn't become a unicorn, that's not your destiny any longer, right? You are the one who sowed the seed. It became a plant under your supervision. Now, whether it stays a plant, becomes a small tree, medium tree, or really large banyan tree, you can just view from the sidelines and say, I was the one who put that seed and I watered that plant every day and I saw it grow to this height and give these many flowers and a few fruits here and there, right? So I think that was advice given to us. It was really good advice given to us at that time. So that's all rational and a rational way to think of it, right? Look, I think the day we had to tell our team that night, we didn't sleep. Both my wife and I, we didn't sleep. We were like scared, like a lot of weird emotions, dreading talking to our team about it. It was very emotional. Like, I don't cry usually. I cried when I told my team, right? And I didn't expect to cry, but like, weird things come. Like, I came to that office when I was like 24 and a half years old. And I left that place when I was 29, but pretty much between 24 and a half and 29, I got engaged and then went back to that office. I got married the day after my wedding. I had a Sunday and then I went back to that office. I had my best days and my worst days of my life in that office. My wife and I became the people who we were in that office, right? So to say goodbye to that place is like super tough, right? Really, really hard. So we struggled to tell our team. We had to manage a lot of emotions when our team were not, were shocked when the decision happened. So it is bittersweet, right? In that sense. And look, there are days when, like, I mean, you know me, right? I wore that Dr.Vaidya's green t-shirt every day to work. Until my father-in-law said, dude, I'll make some, he's in the garments business, he said, I'll make some shirts for you. I'll put the logo, but just wear shirts, don't wear green t-shirt every day to work. I remember very clearly, like the last day was December 2017, 2020. After that, we did our handover remotely also, right? Because of COVID, plus we were like, the more we stay in the office, the more difficult it will be. And I like remember we had a great day at the office. Our team made it super special. I remember, like, I'm a big cricket fan. So like, it was like we like got out of the elevator and it was like, you scored 100, right? So basically, like, you have the crowd cheering you and you're like raising your bat like that. We left the elevator, and from the elevator till our desk, we had like everyone clapping, each team member giving us a rose and a personal message, right? So that was super emotional, and we had a great last day in the office. And then I remember, like, we specifically asked both our families and siblings, like parents and siblings, to come to the office, and we all sat together on that same dining table that we ate our meals at, and had pizza together and said goodbye to Dr. Vaidya, all of us together, right? So, like, super emotional. It's tough. It's not easy to say goodbye. I think the one positive is I get to sleep at night, right? Like that you don't have at all. So we get to sleep at night, and like in like March, after we like officially exited the business, we went to the Maldives. Like, it was crazy. Like, we were sleeping like 9, 10, 11, 12 hours with like no stress. Wake up whenever you want. You wake up at 10 instead of 9. You work out at 11 o'clock. I used to go to play squash at Willingdon Club at 11 o'clock when nobody was in the courts and all. So that was like super cool, new feeling. Like, all of that was really nice. So you get that. But you miss the celebrations, you miss the ups and downs, you miss the roller coaster, you miss all of that. So I think from a sort of like, now that I've had 4 months to step back and see where it is, like, I grew as a person a lot building my company. I matured a lot as a person. Like, I still say that I'm a founder who came from a sheltered background, and so I got to see a lot of reality. I got like beaten down and like pushed to the ground multiple times, and I think it made me the person I am today, and so did it make Trisha as well, right? Like today we taught a D2C course, and I would have never imagined my wife teaching, speaking, writing a LinkedIn post. All of those things we sort of molded ourselves. So from that perspective, it's amazing to go through the journey and look back to see what we've become. Like, lots less hair, and that's all sort of gone. But I think it's amazing to see the people we became. But yes, you do miss the day to day. You miss the office. You miss your. It's weird to say ex-CEO Dr. Vaidya's, like, just really weird, right? And I still get a lot of calls saying, "Hey, like, would you like to advertise in a newspaper? Would we want to nominate you for an award?" And I say, like, no, I'm not the right person any longer. So that feels a little weird. It's a bittersweet feeling, but at our age, to be able to see an exit, like, that's really rare and really powerful feeling, because the power of goodbye is to be able to step back, right?
Yeah.
And positive and negative, be able to just reflect on your journey. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? And the next time you do it, sort of do it better.
Yeah. So I can't even imagine. But when you're talking about landing the message and telling the team, I was wondering that from whatever little I know of you, you sound in general to be a democratic sort of a leader who takes everyone along and is inclusive. And in this decision, did you also at some point of time consider that maybe take this decision also with the team, or was this one of those decisions that you have to take alone and deliver to the team?
Yeah, it was not something we could have taken the team along with in terms of making the decision, right? Because see, at the end of the day, whether it's your team, your family, your friends, your advisors, your mentors, nobody can take this decision for you. No one can help you with the decision as well. And like, I've had so many founders like say, high five, dude, like, amazing. And so many founders also are friends who are like, man, you made a big mistake exiting so early, right? And I feel like nobody's right or wrong, right? Like, nobody's right or wrong in saying what they do. And I think it's eventually what you want to do, right? And so you can't take anyone along in that decision, whether it is choosing your investor, whether it is taking your exit, all of these things, like choosing your life partner, you can't take anyone along for that decision.
I don't know how many people listening know this, but now that Arjun has become an ex-CEO, he's also become a present-day venture capitalist. He's decided to go back into the investing space, but not PE this time, early stage ventures this time. So on that, Arjun, I have two questions that I told you, but I actually thought of another question. First of all, that given the passion that you speak about, operating and starting up, etc., how the hell do you plan to sit on the sidelines and watch others do it? Yeah.
So look, I think, Shashank, I never thought I would get back to investing, right? Never ever thought I'd get back to investing. It wasn't even like a thought process for me. Trisha and I said, okay, we'll take 6 months off. We'll move to Europe. Like, we'll go to London for 3 months. We had planned May to July. We'll be in London, and we'll go there and we'll disconnect from the day to day of, like, if you're in Bombay, basically, like, you end up doing something, right? And And so we said, we'll go there and then we'll find out what's next and figure it out and stuff like that. And we thought of many ideas and things like that. But look, I think once you've gone through this journey, right, and you have some time to step back, you're also tired, right? Like when you're executing and you're building, you're not allowed to be tired. But when you step back, you realize how tired you got. Yeah, like like running a startup for 4.5 has taken a toll on my body. I was not fit. I started working out again. I realized like I cannot run a 21K marathon shutting my eyes today. Yeah, like, and that's bad. I want to be able to do that. Like I've done it 4 times. I want to be able to do it. So we did all of that and then like realized that like for some time we don't want to start up, right? And so we said, okay, okay, like we'll invest now. And we'll get involved with our portfolio companies. We made like 20 angel investments. A lot of founders reached out to us. We mentor advised a bunch of them, spoke to like 200 plus D2C founders, and then heard all the issues of Facebook advertising, RTOs, COD issues, website going down, these kind of things. And then I was like, that's the one thing I don't miss right now, right? Now that I've been able to step back and thought very deeply. And unfortunately, we couldn't go to London, right? Because of the second wave. So we didn't have that option. And then thought very deeply and then said, okay, maybe for a little bit, I don't want to start again. I just want to take some time off. Maybe it's 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever it is. And we had decided, 2021, we won't start up again. And then, as second time or as exited founders, you get some really interesting opportunities that come your way, right? And I had a bunch. I'm going to be honest. I had a bunch, and a lot of VCs also reach out, and most of them just want a view, right, on D2C, like how is it, step back, tell us what we should look for in a business, etc. All of that. And I happened to have one of these conversations with Arjun from Berlin West, and just a general chat, right? There was no agenda. And he said, look, I'm going to leave you with a crazy idea. We've been contemplating a venture strategy for a while, and the mandate is to have an ex-founder who's built and sold a consumer business who's below the age of 40 to run each of the geographies, right? We want it to be a global strategy. Think about it. Like, this is the first time we're talking, so I don't expect you to have any answer for me. Just think about it. And I was like, look, idea seems interesting. Let's talk. And then we spoke for the next 5 weeks, every Monday at 12 o'clock. Like every Monday at 12 o'clock, we talk and think about it. Like, what can we add in terms of value back to the ecosystem? What does this mean, etc. All of that. And as we exit, Shashank, one thing that Trisha and I both really care about is we want to give back value to the ecosystem, and like whatever our 4.5 years of learning gives us, like we want to give that back to founders in some way, shape or form, right? Whether it's investing, whether it's mentoring, whether it's teaching courses, like whatever it is, right? Encapsulating our learnings into a playbook and teaching that, right? So people get access. I think that's what we were doing. And then eventually it seemed just like, hey, you're a founder who has built and sold a brand, who has the opportunity to now be a part of the ecosystem and invest in the next generation of brands. Being a founder, you may know a little bit more about what it is to operate a brand, and getting to partner with sort of one of the best investors in the world in consumer brands and products. It just seemed like a opportunity I couldn't say no to, unfortunately. And so eventually 3.5 weeks ago, I kicked off my journey, but it took 2.5 months of conversations, exploration, discussion, which eventually has led to the new venture strategy at Berlin West.
I think it's a superb story. I think
but like a lot of shock from founders, like, can't believe you're a VC now. Will you change your founder DNA? But every time I talk to founders also, I'm like, by the way, I just want to tell you, I'm a founder first and then an investor.
Actually, that's going to be a big challenge, because one of the jobs of the VC is to, not run the business for the founder. And I assume you will be able to very minutely see what's going right and what isn't, and yet be limited to giving advice and not actually taking the reins in your own hands. Do you worry about that, about keeping a distance?
No, honestly, Shashank, I don't worry, right? Because I'm mindful now that I'm not the owner any longer or the operator, right? So I think from that perspective, I'm mindful. Sometimes, like from our angel portfolio companies also, I see someone making a mistake and I'm like, don't do this, man, don't do this. But that's all you can say, right? And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. And when I'm proven wrong also, I'm happy. So look, you're partnering with people who you think are smarter than you and who can execute better than you. And that's the way I'll look at investing as well. And wherever I need to give advice, I'll give the advice, but it's not my job to force my advice down someone's throat. Whether it's telling you something about what I feel about Whole Truth or it's a portfolio company, I'll never force my advice down anyone's throat.
Super. Okay, my 2 questions on now you becoming a VC. One is, you were telling me that World Invest was looking for someone who's built and sold a business under the age of 40. But now that you're in venture investing, you also want big outcomes. So how do you advise the entrepreneurs that you now meet on building for IPO versus building for strategic sale? Not building for strategic sale, but because as we know, you can't build for selling it off. But if they have options on the table, how do you advise them to think about it?
Look, I think I cannot advise an entrepreneur to decide between an IPO and a strategic sale. Right? That's a very personal decision for the entrepreneur. What my job is as an investor or as an advisor or as a mentor or whatever a founder may see me as is, hey, look, it's really, really tough to run the day to day and still step back and see the bigger picture, right? It's the biggest problem of every founder. You get so engrossed in the day to day, you miss the big picture, and then you end up doing the same numbers every month, right? The best founders actually are able to spend 30-40% of their time on the big picture, even 30% of the time on the big picture, and the rest of the time on the operation. Look, there were many Facebooks before Facebook, many Googles before Google, many Apples before Apple. The reason these companies won is because they were operational execution, efficiency, excellence, etc. All of that. But they also are able to step back and say, hey, like, I'm not writing every single piece of copy, or I'm not writing every single post that goes up, or all of those things, right? Because that's not scalable any longer. So I think from that perspective, my goal would be, hey, I've done these things, right? And some of these things I've done very wrongly as well. Like I'm the first one to say, hey, these are the mistakes we made at Dr.Vaidya's. These are things we did right, but these are also things we did wrong. Don't do the same things wrong as well, right? And we have the benefit of being able to do that. So I think my job would be, hey, like, there is opportunity for you to scale exponentially, right? Don't think of 1 to 1.1, think of 1 to 2. And in digital businesses or in consumer brands or in consumer internet, you are able to get that alpha really quickly, right? So that's my goal. What the outcome is, how the outcome happens, what the founder chooses, that's not my decision at all. My decision is, hey, if you're at 1 today, how do we get to 5 in 3-4 years, or how do we get to 5 in 3 years? That's what I would focus on.
Yeah. And what's the one thing that as an entrepreneur you didn't like about how VCs operated that you'd like to change in the way you operate as a VC?
Look, I think I wouldn't say that I don't like anything or I like anything, right? I think that that's not my job to say. What I will say though is that I definitely want to be as myself empathetic, right? Because look, I'll tell you what I've seen, right? Whether you're running a consumer brand doing 10 lakhs a month, 1 crore a month, 10 crores a month, or 100 crores a month, you're putting in the same hours of work, right? You're still, all of us are at work 14, 15 hours a day grinding, right? Some of us have done some things more right, and some of us have done some things not so right, which is preventing our scale, or maybe it's the market, maybe it's the product, whatever it is, right? But that respect to founders, right, is critical. So my wife works as an advisor to Global Bees, where they acquire these businesses as well, right? And the one thing which she also lives by is whether you're investing, angel investing, professionally investing, acquiring, strategically investing, whatever you're doing, you have to show that founder the respect. You have to show that founder. I'll tell you one story, right? Without giving names. There was a company that was looking at a strategic investment in another company, right? X company that was looking to invest is 1,000 times the size of Y company that they're looking to acquire or strategically invest in. Y company said, hey, we are open to having a conversation, but Mr. X, who's 1,000 times the size, the deal will be struck in my office and not yours. Company X, who's 1,000 times the size, could have said, hey, no, you come to my office for the deal to happen. And that could have been a deal breaker, right? Company X said, I will come to your office, I'll sit in your office, I'll drink your chai, and I'll close the deal in your office. In 2 hours, the deal was closed. I don't want to say who this was, but in 2 hours, the deal was closed, right? So that empathy is able to change things significantly. Right? Whether you do a deal or not, that empathy is really important. And you'll remember, Shashank, you must have met tens of investors, right? And you'll remember, even though the ones that didn't do the deal with you, you'll remember some of them to be people who really made an impact on your life.
No, absolutely. Like we were discussing at the beginning, that eventually, ceteris paribus, it comes down to being an emotional, human-led, respect-led decision. And I loved the answer that you gave, and I'm very, very certain that you'll make a brilliant VC. And I wish more entrepreneurs and founders entered the venture capital space, so that level of empathy transfers. And while this is a financial transaction, it is a lot more than that too, because a lot of people are giving their life and blood to it, and least we can do is be respectful of each other. Superb. Thank you so much, Arjun, for making the time. I learned a lot. And as you said, like the biggest two things for me were you have to have a view to where does this go, because anything that lives has to, I don't want to say die, but whatever you enter, you need to exit eventually. So you should always have a view to that. And the second is, I love your equanimity that I met you in the pre-selling days and nowadays, and you're the same person. I don't see any airs about you. I don't, a lot of us sitting on the outside believe, oh, ab to crorepati ho gaye and ab to bahut kuch ho gaya, and nothing's changed. And the fact,
Nothing
yeah,
changes.
and the fact that you are actually coming back to work in the same ecosystem and give back. Huge kudos to you, and all the best for the future holds.
Thank you, Shashank, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you like this episode, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel so we can continue making more of these. And tell us who you'd like us to host next in the comments below. Ciao for now.